Hey, welcome to the Raising the Standard Show. I'm Dr. Andrea Ramirez. I am thrilled to have with me today, oh, sorry for hitting your papers, one of my favorite co-hosts, Miss Esmeralda Sanchez, who's about to start her PhD program at Rice University, and we are just so very proud of you. Thanks for being here.
Oh, well, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here again with you all, and today's topic is something that I'm definitely going to be using this August and for the next few years, and so we're going to be talking about tips for studying, so studying tips.
Yeah, we have none other than Pastor Ray Marin with us. We're here from Nashville, Tennessee, and so Dr. Reyes and Pastor Ray Marin are here, and we're just thrilled that you are joining us. We're also going to hear from Yvette Santana later on in our challenge, but as you think about your favorite places to study, what comes to mind?
Well, that's an important question, and I think when I give my answer, it doesn't apply to everyone. So moms and dads, students, you really need to find out what works for you, what helps you to really get into your study, get into your project. But to be quite honest with you, when I really need to get work done or study or read scripture or really spend a lot of time focusing, I do a couple of things. Number one is I go to the mall. Number two is I go to the food court in the mall. Number three is I find the busiest, loudest place in the center of the food court. I claim that table, get me a cup of coffee or some iced tea, and that's where I study. And that's where I study the best. I don't know why, but it works for me. I'm able to just shut out the noise and just focus. It helps me, forces me to focus. Now, that might not work for everybody, but I think the important point here is that some people study well in that environment. Other people, like my wife, she needs quiet. So you can imagine us as a couple, I mean, I need noise, she needs quiet. We probably don't study together too often.
Well, if you think about it, if you're a parent who's more like your wife, who likes it to be quiet, and then have a child that's more like you, it could think that they're really doing them a service by saying, no, we need to turn everything off and you need to focus completely. But it could be that your child studies differently than you studied. And so that's what we want to dive into today, is the differences of studying. In particular, how does our faith impact the way that we look at studying and the concept of studying? Because they're connected, right? I mean, Scripture talks about it, and we certainly want to dive into that. So we're so excited that you're here and excited to hear what the Lord has placed on your heart. We're going to get to hear a little bit of Pastor Marin's story. I know that the Lord has taken you all over the United States, so we'll jump into that. But first, we want you to know at home something that you can do to get involved in education equality across our country. So watch this and find out how you can get involved.
The biggest problem in our educational system today is the lack of equality. We have children in certain areas of our country that receive one degree of education, while children in the urban centers primarily receive another sort of education, one that is diminished and diluted. We have educational inequality.
Hey, welcome back to the Raising the Standard Show. We are talking about study tips and the concept of studying and how it is impacted by our relationship with Christ. And I have with us Pastor Ray Marin, who serves as the Accelerated Christian Education Ministry representative. And you know, you've been pastoring for 9 years and have some children. How old are your kids?
Well, my kids are, I just have a recent high school graduate. She's 17. And then I have 3 boys, 15, 12, and 9 years old.
Oh, wow. So studying is definitely happening
Studying
at your
is key.
house.
Studying is key. It's fundamental. It's so important. And so we're excited. We're excited.
Well, you know, one of our verses that we just feel like the Lord has placed on our hearts is, we see it multiple times in Scripture, and we see it particularly in Matthew, where Jesus is talking and saying, love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. We think as a church we've done a pretty good job with loving the Lord with all of our heart and our soul, but sometimes not always with our mind. So I was curious, as we kind of reel back and start from the beginning, when you think about loving the Lord with all of your mind, what comes to mind? What does that mean to you personally?
Well, it means giving everything that I have to Him. And so it's so important. That's something that we've instilled in the kids from birth. And so that's so important. We give ourselves greatly to education. That's been our key role. And I see the need. I see the need with the young kids.
So when you think about your kids, because I'm just thinking 3 boys, you know, I mean, and your daughter, but when you think about motivating 3 sons to
entirely
study,
different.
Wow.
how do you
So
do
different.
that? How do you go
It's a
around?
lot of
Talk
work.
to us, unwrap that for us. What are some tips that you can give to parents of how you do that?
Well, one thing is you have to be on top of things. I challenge parents all the time. You need to be aware. You need to take the time. I know in a busy schedule we get distracted, easily distracted with ball games, with practices, gymnastics. There's so many things that we offer today for today's youth, but it's so important that we take the time to actually have a vested interest in our young people, to understand that we're the primary educators, that we as a family, we control that environment, the character, the integrity, and so we have to take the time to slow the pace down at home, to understand that yes, there are things out there, television, games that we get distracted with, and then say we need to pull back a little because we need to study. It's our responsibility as parents to really challenge the young people, our children, to understand that they're doing this not only for themselves, but to glorify God in their walk.
That's a good word. That's a good word.
I think that's so important what you just said, to help your children make that connection,
Right.
that what they're doing in terms of studying and their academics
Right.
is tied to glorifying the Lord.
Right, and it starts with us. And so when they see an interesting illustration is with my daughter. She grew up, she was very close to her grandmother, and as she passed, one of the things she wanted to hold on to was her Bible. And it was interesting because as a pastor, she challenged me one day. She says, Dad, I want Grandma's Bible. This is what I want. This means a lot. And I said, why is that so important? And she goes, because of the amount of time I saw my grandmother spend with that Bible.
That's good.
You know, and it was a challenge to me
It's good
because
testimony.
it wasn't directed towards me, and it was
Right.
it was a little humbling as a pastor.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I do study, but she understood the amount of time Grandma spent, the hours, day after day, meant something to Grandma, and it meant something to her.
Which is really great, because if mom and dad are studying,
Correct.
kids are studying.
Right.
You know, I mean,
It has to be visible.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a picture that stays in your mind, because I remember walking in on my mom studying and in the Word, and she just kind of, she was like, it's okay, but I'm focused right now on spending time with the Lord. And I felt like there was a sacredness that I walked into, that it stayed with me, that it was important to her to set aside time away from being a mom, away from being all the other things in life, and to really dig into the Word. And it really did speak to me. It stayed with me.
Right.
You know, you have such an interesting story. We would love to hear about it. You know, what's your educational path, and what did the Lord help you to overcome to reach the heights that you've been able to?
Well, mine, I was originally a business major, so I went to college, and during that course, the Lord opened up some interesting opportunities, one ultimately coming to the most recent, opening up a Christian school in the inner cities. But that started way back as a teenager. I had the privilege to go to a small Christian school, and it's so important for our churches to realize how important it is to instill and to impact our young people. I had an opportunity to go to this small Christian school, and it was at that Christian school that somebody led me to the Lord. And so at that point, I understood the importance of the church. Well, shortly after, one of the stories I like to tell is I met a young lady at that Christian school. She would later on go on to be my wife. And mom was old school. Her mom was one of these ladies where if you want to come and date, if you want to come and visit Sandy, come to church. We'll see you there. And that's the way it started. And so I remember getting a provisional license. I thought it was all that because I had a car, I had a license, and I stopped by to pick up my girlfriend. And so, you know, this was an exciting time. It was summer. We were going to maybe go out to Huntington Beach or go down to Alvera Street down in LA and have some taquitos with guacamole, that type of thing.
There you go. Now you're
And you know, I walked in. Yeah, I walked in, and I'm in the church now. Okay, they said pick up your wife, or pick up my wife not at the time, but now they said pick her up, and I said sure enough. So I'll go down there, and I'm thinking all these, you know, we're gonna have a great time this summer. The first thing I encounter is 60 young people, 60 children sitting by the altar, and they're waiting. And I'm wondering, who are they waiting for? Well, they're waiting for me, little did I know. And so the VBS director comes up to me and she says, Brother Ray, we've been waiting for you. Well, the only thing I had in mind was I'm going to pick up Sandy and we're going to go out and have some fun. And Sister Hilda Reels, godly woman, brings me in and she says, now you go to that little Christian school. I've heard a lot about that. And I said, sure. I said, I do. She goes, you know stories. David and Goliath, Samson. I said, I sure do. Wonderful. And she gives me these poster boards and she says, and you can read. And she says, go at it. And that was my introduction to youth ministry.
Wow.
And so as a young teenager here I have these young people. But what it did as we ministered, and this little church was in Boyle Heights, I got an opportunity to see the other side, a side in which ministry was different. Here we had young children, broken homes coming from the projects, Aliso Pico, Ramona Gardens. They were struggling. And so it introduced me to a different component, something that I hadn't seen in my church, something I hadn't seen in my little Christian school. It was an opportunity to open up the eyes and see within the inner city, within the urban circle, that there was a need. And so with that and with the help of the church, I began to realize that there was something more that I needed to do, and that was God was calling me to something greater.
That's right.
So when you think about your time in the inner city and in urban centers in particular, what challenges do you see that urban center students face that you would want the whole body to know, hey, listen, these are some unique challenges to this demographic? Well,
one, like myself, the church plays an important role. No matter whether it's large, whether it's small, we all have a role. And especially with congregations that say we can't do anything with the inner city youth, all we have are older folks. That's a wonderful opportunity because there's a biblical mandate that the older folks, the older men, the older women, take a vested interest in the lives of the children.
Oh, that's good.
And to pass on something to another generation. And this is exactly what happened with Hilda. Here we have a woman. She saw there was a need with the children. She saw a young man and she said, we're going to use you. And it encouraged me because as I saw that I could do something, it had a profound impact on my life. And so this is so important that we let the churches know that there's so much you can do in reaching young people. And so there's a lot that can be said concerning the homeschool movement, churches opening doors. That's a wonderful ESL programs. There's a number of opportunities right now in this day and age with education that we can really stress and work with these young youth.
You know, you bring up such a good point because churches tend to have space. And schools and homeschool groups and sometimes math classes need a space that's safe, that's a place that they can come in and
tutoring,
work on studying and connecting maybe even with some church members who can volunteer to help studying. So with studying, that's exciting.
And you have so many retired folks in the churches today that whether it's a retired engineer or a nurse that can come down and they can bless young people. And the thing is when you're reaching those young people, there's a conversation that you're engaging with. And so I tell a lot of people, you come in and you're saying, well, what can I do? Can I do a hobby? Can I do a craft? Do these things, but what it's going to do is it's going to engage you in a conversation. It's going to allow you to talk to the young person and find out what's happening at home. Is it a broken home? Or is there bullying going on? These things, this engagement takes place, and so this is so important.
Well, it's a relationship, and that's what you're doing. And Jesus was about relationships. So when you practice that in the church or the school or home, you're practicing Jesus' agenda.
Well, and I think the opportunities that we give our students to go ahead and be a leader, because she could have probably done the same thing, but she took a step back, gave you some tools, and said, we've been waiting for you. I mean, what a great message to come into.
And it didn't hurt him. He still married Sandy.
So
that's right. And it worked out great.
It
worked out great. And so there's so many opportunities. I mean, if I have the time, I just want to share. There was another opportunity in which we had one of our older church members. And I saw him walking, and it was funny because Sandy looked at me, and I said, I see Brother Pete here walking. I said, but he's walking with bags around his shoes. I said, what's going on here? She says, well, he's going to the mission. He's going to preach. And I said, sure enough, I said, what can we do? She says, give him a ride. She goes, take him over there. And he began a conversation with me. I said, Brother Pete, what are you doing here? And he says, I'm going to go out to the mission. I'm going to preach at Skid Row. And then he says, and he looks at me and he says, and you can too.
Wow, that's such a good point. I'm so excited that we're going to get to come back and talk and visit with you guys for part 2. But I want you to know at home about our challenge today. Who's going to be presenting our challenge? Hermana Yvette Santana. She is such a blessing to me personally. She's a women's discipleship coordinator for the Church of God Southwest. She's been in ministry for 26 years with her husband. She has an undergrad in sociology, a master's in educational psychology. She served as a counselor for K through 12 urban schools, and I just know that you'll be blessed. So just listen in and expect God to do great things through this message.